I know Dustin, it's not deserve the title fight, but we don't have any option right now. Everybody busy. I want to fight 3 times in the year. Have to call someone, and Poirier is free now. I have to fight. I don't care. And I'm healthy now. I'm training every day. He have good guillotine. Not me, but I hope one day he will finish someone. I don't want to people make upset, but this is useless fight for useless belt, and nobody gains nothing from this fight. I have three guys: Tsarukyan, Oliveira, and Gaethje. But Tsarukyan and Oliveira, I beat them already, both of them. I have Gaethje, you know. He deserves his fight for the title now. Okay, if Gaethje lose, he lose everything, you know. If Holloway lose, who will fight with the Topuria? Chandler to look very bad. How many years he waiting for this fight? He every night he go to the bed and have dream. I will fight with Conor McGregor.
Islam's a funny guy, but he wants Dustin Poirier at UFC 302 in June because he wants somebody to fight. And this seems like the biggest takeaway of this whole interview that he had with MMAJunkie. And honestly, it could happen regarding that UFC 300 is happening in April, 2 months prior to that. Gaethje and Holloway are most likely going to take way too much damage to return 2 months later. Oliveira and Arman, it depends how that goes down. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's guaranteed that Dustin's going to get Islam Makhachev. I think there still is a chance for Oliveira or Arman to jump in 2 months later to fight Islam if they come out of their fight without any crazy damage. And the only way that could happen is if one of them has a big first round finish on the other. For example, like how Charles knocked out Beneil Dariush, he didn't suffer any damage in the fight. If he does that to Arman Tsarukyan, I think he'll be ready to fight Islam in June. Also vice versa if Arman does it the other way. For an example, how they both eradicated Beneil Dariush. Poor guy's about to appear so much on the 300 promos because the reason as to why them two could get the title shot over Poirier is number one. I mentioned it before that Dana White said that that's the number one contender fight. That's the fight that's going to determine who's going to fight Islam next. And number two, Dustin isn't deserving, and even Islam admitted so, right? Islam even said that Dustin doesn't deserve a title shot, and it's because he got knocked out by Justin Gaethje not too long ago. He's coming off one win against the number 13 Benoit Saint-Denis. Nothing against Benoit, but he's just not up in the rankings yet to warrant Dustin Poirier of this title shot. And we all know how that fight is going to go down. We know how Islam is going to run through Dustin. As much as we love Dustin Poirier, he's an amazing fighter, a legend in the game. Islam is just a horribly stylistic matchup against him. And he might pull that trigger on the guillotine when Islam shoots on him too. And Islam's going to expect it, of course. I see Islam absolutely dominating him with the wrestling and even catch him with a few good strikes in the feet before he takes the fight to the ground. So we have to see what happens at 300 before they decide on Islam's next fight. And I think they're not going to announce anything until UFC 300 is over because you just don't know how any of those fights are going to go down. This MMA game is a very wild one. I mean, who knows? What if Gaethje KOs Max Holloway in the first round? It's very unlikely. And Oliveira and Arman have this 3-round war. Then it could be Gaethje going into the fight with Islam Makhachev, and Islam even said that Gaethje is the fighter that deserves it the most in his opinion because he already beat Oliveira and Arman before. He never fought Gaethje. That'll be Gaethje's third win in a row. He beat Rafael Fiziev in a very good fight. He knocked out Dustin Poirier, and then he knocks out Max Holloway. The thing that could go against Gaethje coming into that fight with Islam that quickly is that he just doesn't like these quick turnaround fights. He never liked them. He has expressed that before. He wants good time to prepare for his next opponent. So I'm thinking the winner of Oliveira and Arman is going to be the number one consideration. Then number two is going to be if Gaethje's able to beat Max. But what if Max beats Gaethje? He could get a title shot against Islam as well. But I don't think he would jump over Oliveira or Arman, even with a win over Gaethje. I mean, it could happen, but I just don't see Dana going that direction, right? Especially with Ilia Topuria being the champion, and they would love to have Max fight him instead. But it could kind of have him in a placeholder at 155 when he makes his way back down to 145. So let's say Max beats Gaethje, gets that upset win, comes back down to 145, he's going to have that placeholder at 155 if he wants to jump back up there. But then things could get really wild if he beat Topuria and became champ. Then 145 is going to be in a very weird place. And then you can't have Max jump up because, you know, he's got to have some title defenses before he does it. But he did beat Gaethje. You know, it creates a very unique problem if Max beats Gaethje and then goes back down to 145 and beats Topuria, which I don't think he would do it. I think he loses to Gaethje, and I think he would probably lose to Topuria as well. Max beating both of these these guys is not crazy, in my opinion. He's a good enough of a fighter to pull that off. And then the third placement for Islam Makhachev, I think, is probably Dustin Poirier. And then after that would be like Mateusz Gamrot, because they did screw him over back then when he was supposed to be the backup fighter instead of Volkanovski. And I always think about making a video about who I think has the best chances of beating Islam Makhachev and beating some of these other champions like, Sean O'Malley now and all that stuff. I might make a video on those. But he also talked about Alexander Volkanovski coming back and losing to Ilia Topuria. And he does believe that Volkanovski came back way too soon, right after he got knocked out by Islam. And he doesn't blame it on Volk. He holds fault on his coaches because the fighter is going to fight. That's their job. It's the coaches that have to bring him into reality, right? And bring him back down to earth. After he got knocked out by Islam, Volk's coaches should have sat him down and told him, yo, we're going to take some time off. You got to heal. Topuria is not someone to just jump into the octagon with right after getting knocked out like that. And this is a common belief amongst a lot of fans that Volkanovski's coaches are just making very questionable decisions and saying some of the weirdest stuff. Like his head coach, Joe Lopez, saying that Topuria won because of a puncher's chance, which is absolutely insane. When you understand what Topuria did to him, technically, not just punched him. He didn't just punch him. The way he found his entry on Volk, cut him off and lined him up for the right hand, there is no puncher's chance there. That was all technique and skill. He completely read Volkanovski to a T and executed perfectly. And if a coach is saying that about his own fighter, he's too much of a fan of his fighter. We've seen this with many other coaches in the past. And not only that, Eugene Berriman is saying some crazy stuff as well. These guys around Volkanovski could get him hurt because now he's talking about fighting again this year. And yes, fighting later in the year is not a bad idea necessarily, but I do think because of 2 knockout losses in a row in his mid-30s, and he was out cold, like these are very bad concussions he suffered, I think he should take a year off. I don't think he should be fighting this year because people only take into account the fight. He's not just going to fight later this year. He's going to be in training camp for like 2 months before that. And he's going to be sparring during that too. So if he fights in December, it's not going to be 8 months of rest before he fights in December. It's going to be like 6 months because it's going to take 2 months before the fight in training camp, sparring and getting hit in the head again. The fight is not where he starts getting hit in the head first. It's the sparring leading up to it. That's when he starts getting more concussions or more head trauma. And half a year rest, I don't think is enough. And I've mentioned before that Volkanovski does come from rugby. And I did see some of your guys' comments that know about rugby, and these guys return way too quickly from their sport, and that's where Volk comes from, right? So he might have this like belief that, if I just take a few months off, because in rugby, it's just a few weeks, I come back in there. If I take a few months off, that's more than enough, when that's not the case. I don't know how advanced in rugby the whole belief about concussions and head trauma, importance on recovery, and all that stuff is in that sport. I don't know how well it's understood, but Volk definitely needs a long time off before he comes back. And I worry for Volk because some of his coaches that are around him, they might make him believe that Topuria did get lucky, because eventually fighters start to get into this delusional phase where they have to have the utmost belief in themselves. And the last thing regarding Islam Makhachev is about the whole Conor McGregor Michael Chandler thing. Islam actually said that Chandler should lose more so he could build confidence for Conor to fight him. I don't know what's going on with that fight. Conor just had some interviews and he was talking about how he wants to come back, but they keep pushing the date, and it's making him lose interest in training specifically. He was saying that whenever they push my date back, I stop training fully. And man, in those interviews, Conor's not looking too great. He's looking like he's been partying a little bit too hard, a little bit dehydrated, if you know what I'm saying. And I'm not talking about him not drinking proper 12. And honestly, I don't even know what they're doing. I don't know why they don't want Conor to fight Chandler as quickly as they could. This fight could have happened a year ago, and it would generate a lot of money doing it. This could have headlined UFC 300. This could have headlined many cards even before. This could have been the December card. This could have been, any time. But for some weird reason, they're not pushing for the fight. And Dana seems like he doesn't even care about it that much. He's even saying that he doesn't know when Conor's going to come back. So is it Conor that's pushing this back? But he seems very eager to fight. I can't imagine Michael Chandler's pushing this back. That would make no sense. And these two guys are only getting older, especially Chandler. Chandler's been around for a long time. He doesn't have much time to waste. He wanted to come into the UFC, have the biggest fights as fast as possible, explode onto the scene, and then explode out of it. I never expected Michael Chandler to be this inactive, and I don't even think it's his fault. You could say it's kind of his fault, and he's waiting for Conor so much, and he just should take another fight. I mean, he could have. He could have taken multiple fights up until now, but he didn't know that. He thought this fight was going to happen a while ago, but it didn't, and we all thought that too.